So the first thing I'm going to ask you is just tell us about your journey to where you are now and how you decided to be a lifelong professional athlete. And then to, while still being a professional athlete, do all of this other amazing work and bring these stories to life.
Yes, I always kind of laugh when people ask me, what do you do and how do you explain yourself? Because it's actually quite hard, because I have not chosen a traditional path, either in sport or kind of being a female entrepreneur. So but definitely athletics and sport are the core kind of behind everything I do. And that came from high school. That came from me as a kid camping. My mom would take us camping and I always wanted to be outside. And I sort of learned the joy of movement and cross country running in high school. And that really kind of, for me as a young girl with, body image issues and just like, single mom, like sort of trying to find our way. We're all trying to find our way at that time, but we had, a little bit of extra sort of feeling lost. And sport, finding the cross country running team and a community of people and learning that like my body could do really cool things, that was really changed the trajectory of my life, was finding sport. And that is the through line really throughout, 4 decades of being an athlete. I didn't start thinking I'm going to be a professional athlete like your kids today. It was more, I went to that sport because it felt good. I met my friends. It was confidence building. So all those things happened in high school and in college. I ran in college for a little bit, found a bike, found rock climbing, found paddling. Like there's been a long list of, I'm sort of like the cat with 9 lives or maybe more. But yeah, sport has been the through line, and really I felt like it chose me because I kind of needed it for my own personal confidence. And it's still that same feeling of, when I'm not feeling good, I'm not feeling strong, or I'm getting down on myself and I go out for a run and instantly there's a shift in mindset. And of course, we know so much more now about the neurochemicals that are released and all the cool stuff that's happening when you move. And I found that as a kid, but it has stayed with me because it's been an important part of my life. And really, as far as creating businesses and all that, I kind of was operating by the seat of my pants and following passion and following things that were fun to do, but I also seemed to have a sort of skill level at. And so in college, I chose to, go into business, but with a kinesiology and a little bit of a major. And then I ended up working at a rock climbing gym and then opening rock climbing gyms as sort of this entrepreneur sport thing that has been the theme. And honestly, it's changed and morphed so many times. I probably could have chosen an easier job because I really have had to kind of sort of be a trailblazer in a lot of ways. And I can look back now and go, yeah, that was the right thing to do. But in the moment, with no health insurance, no consistent paycheck, not a clear trail map as to where it was going, it's definitely been hard. But looking backwards, it's hindsight is 2020. Now I'm all about encouraging more people to find healing and find their strength by moving in the outdoors. And a little bit of, I guess I call it like wilderness wisdom, passing on the wilderness wisdom of what nature and movement really can teach us for any profession, whether you want to be a professional athlete or whether you want to, whatever you're going to do. So yeah, that is kind of the theme throughout my whole career and the decades that I've been doing this.
What was it like to be a Red Bull athlete really early on in that kind of creation and evolution of that space?
Red Bull was amazing. And, I was 22 years as a Red Bull athlete, which is a pretty long run. One of actually my first real sponsor was Red Bull. And the amazing thing about it is that the people there in that community, and Jamie Simon, who was a professional kayaker, she's world champion kayaker, she was my athlete manager and the first person I met there. And here was this female former professional athlete in like whitewater kayaking, gnarly. And she's like, I believe in you. I want to give you a chance. And she was in this high powered position at Red Bull. And so seeing her as an example of someone who believed in me, that was really powerful. And at that time with Red Bull, there were no contracts. There was nothing signed on a piece of paper. There was no like, you need to do this and this and this. Jamie gave me the gift of creativity and said, go think of something crazy and cool to do. And so there really were no guidelines or barriers. And it was actually really challenging because I'd come, they'd say, bring us some ideas. What do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they were like, no, it doesn't work that way. And we'd have these meetings and these sessions where really they did mentor me to be creative and to dream and to think. And I'd go and think of these ideas and they wouldn't get through and they'd fail and they'd be like, come back. And they'd sort of, but then when an idea did stick and got accepted and a project was green lighted, I really felt I was part of it because I created it, with their help. They were mentoring and like, well, what about this? And what about this? But it really did push me early on in my career to realize that you don't have to follow the status quo. You don't have to follow someone else's trail map, that you really can choose your compass, or find things you're passionate about, and that you can create a career for yourself and a path for yourself, even as a professional athlete, which I never dreamed that I could create a career, decades later as a professional athlete. But I really do have to credit Red Bull and Jamie and my athlete managers was giving me a few bumpers, and a little bit of mentorship, but really no guidelines, just kind of like, well, let's see what you could come up with. And as a young person, to get that stamp of approval and the confidence, but also to get the freedom to sort of like, I can make stuff up. Are you kidding me? And it was really cool, but it was also really hard. And, like any athlete sponsorship, those are renewed year to year. And so there is no guarantee, that you'll be a Red Bull athlete for 22 years, for example. It was like, so it really pushed me to strive for excellence because you get that report card basically the end of every year. Are you going to keep your job or are you not going to keep your job? And there have been years that I've won world championships. I did everything I was going to do on paper and have lost partnerships because that's just the way marketing budgets go. And so it really, the style of the career that I've chosen really did push me to strive really hard, especially in the early years.
How did that morph into, or when did these kind of crazy endurance races that you've done, and will you explain for people who may not be as familiar with your career, will you explain some of the things that you've done? Because they're absolutely incredible. I mean, mind-blowing that that environment even exists and that people choose to do it. To me, it's, I am, that's not my persona. And so I'm always blown away when I hear about these accomplishments because it's just mind blowing to me.
Well, look, I would never go into operating room and, cut into people either. So I will say, as sports are such a great, kind of template to look for high achievement as examples. But in any career, in any high performing human, there is a level of expertise. So yeah, I've done a bunch of crazy stuff. I did the Grand Canyon on a riverboard, which is like a boogie board in winter, a month, unsupported in 40-degree water with two other women. That had never been done before. Let's see, I biked up and down Kilimanjaro. I really thrive in ultra endurance, multi-sport expedition type racing. And so if anyone remembers Eco Challenge or adventure racing, they basically put you out in the Borneo jungle and say, okay, get from point A to point B, however you can get there. So a lot of navigation, a lot of different sports I've done. And, I love the exploratory aspect of that. I've climbed El Cap. I've, done a bunch of big wall climbing. I've ridden the Iditarod Trail in winter on my bike, self-supported. And kind of the theme are like I said, ultra endurance, sometimes very little sleep, multi-day, self-supported, or just a small team you're depending on, and really, putting your physical body to the test, but also your thinking brain. It's not just, how many miles you can slog out. It's choosing, route choice, when you sleep, what equipment you take, especially carrying things on your back. So that's the kind of stuff that lights me up, because it's never the same. I think that's the biggest part. There is such a challenge and diversity in going and doing adventures like that. And I'm still doing them, which is awesome. And hopefully I'll do them for the rest of my life. But yeah, that's the kind of crazy stuff I do. But I think the reason people ask me all the time why I go do this really ultra endurance long stuff. And honestly, I feel like the physical sort of, it's kind of weakening the physical layers and sort of peeling away all the defense layers of us that we put up of like, I've got this, I can do anything. When I'm physically tired and I'm out in the field, I feel like I really get a look, and this happens to everyone. You get a look of who is the true core human without the barriers that we put up, without the defenses. And I found that in my ultra endurance teams, when you're out there, I'm with a team of 3 guys, and they're on their knees crying because they're cold or they're lost or it's hard. And then you really find who that human is. And we so rarely touch the core of ourselves. And for me, any parent, you could talk to any parent. I'm not a parent, but like that probably peels away those defense layers of like having a child. For me, I access that with hard physical things. And it's basically a way to reach an understanding of myself and the people around me who happen to be on the trail with me.
How do you manage fear in those situations? Or do you experience fear? Is maybe a better question.
Yes, I experience fear. So fear is a survival mechanism, and we all have fear. And it's meant to protect us. And I talk about, like, I can imagine, standing on a start line of Leadville 100 or something, a mountain bike race. And I'm like, oh, I have fear. Well, really, you have anticipation. And so, like, the more that we learn about, neurochemistry and how the body responds, people sometimes give fear a bad rap as if it's a 4-letter word. And it's not. It's actually a survival mechanism. It's an excitement mechanism. It means that you care. It means that, like, you're alive and well. I think where fear gets a bad rap is when we let it consume our actions, and we either get paralyzed, fight or flight, or flourish or freeze. What are you going to do when you feel that anticipation? And sport is again such a good template to practice that, because look, we're all going to lose a job. We're all going to lose people in our life that we love. We're all going to develop, an illness, or our house might burn down or something. We don't get to practice for those hardships, but we can practice them in sport, and we can practice those. And an example I'll give you is, the last, one of the Iditarod Trail Invitationals I did, in winter, self-supported on the Iditarod Trail, and you're carrying everything with you on your bike. And there's some major fear, because if I mess up, I could freeze to death. Literally freeze to death. And I'm sleeping out in minus 40-degree temperatures. And so the way that I dealt with fear for that race is I prepared meticulously, because I was terrified that I don't go into these types of expeditions wanting to die or anything like that. I go because I want to experience Alaska in winter and howl with the wolves. But in order to do that and not die, I need to prepare. And so it's meticulous preparation, controlling what you can, trial and error. I slept out in my sleeping bag in our backyard in the snow in Idaho, a bunch of, to practice, and lit my stove with my gloves on and things like that, to just kind of like practice. So it's like anything, you practice. But fear, I actually think, is really healthy. So when that does come up, it's kind of like, okay, let's evaluate this. And sort of a tactic I use is I pretend like I'm speaking to someone else. So if I'm out there, I'm in the middle of Alaska and I'm terrified, I'd be like, okay, Jen, what are you going to do about it? There's nobody here. Let's take stock of your situation. Do you have enough food? Do you have enough water? Da, da, da. Do you want it? Your options are to go back and go to the start line, or to go forward, or to take a rest. Or so a lot of times I take myself out of that. And that's a tactic that I use. I pretend like I'm talking to a friend, and I use this for fear. I use it for negative, if I've got that voice in my head that's saying, you suck, you're terrible, you can't do this. I'll be like, okay, what would I tell Jen? What would I tell my sister? What would I tell my friend? And often that language, when it sort of removes the emotion out of it, and you're like, okay, I'm going to deal with this situation. So that's a tactic I use a lot, is just to sort of take myself out of it and just take stock, as I would in any sort of emergency situation or fearful situation. Oh, we've got you frozen for a minute. I don't know if it's me.
And I think I'm just muted. Can you hear me?
There we go. Okay. Yeah.
So one more kind of off the record question, not off the record, but just off the script question. How has this, but I think it's really important, right? You've had this amazing career in athletics and sport, and parallel to that, you have been this incredible female entrepreneur. So not only have you been living your athletic life and your sport life, you have been thinking of ways to optimize other parts and bring those to life. How do those relate, and how has one channeled the other?
Honestly, I created a lot of those things because they weren't there. So, in mountain biking, I sort of went to one of my partners and was like, mountain biking came late for me, and I was really bad at mountain biking early on. I'm like, look, there's no skills things for women. And they're like, okay, well, what do you want to do about it? Was literally what they said. I'm like, okay, I want to create free mountain bike education for women. And so they sort of threw it back at me. And so a lot of this entrepreneurial stuff is like, I didn't see what I needed in the world. I didn't see, sports education for women. I didn't see women, showing up and doing speaking. I didn't see women starting events. And so I'm like, well, shoot, I'll just do it if it's not there. And so that kind of necessity sort of led me to do that, instead of say, well, that's a bummer, nothing is there for me. So instead of saying that, it's like, well, can we do it? Can we make one? And, just, yeah. And you find that what was really interesting is creating a lot of those women's mountain bike free clinics. That was 15 or 20 years ago. And then all of a sudden, all the guys are like, oh, can we come? Can we, so it's like, it's not just women's opportunities. It's creating opportunity where there wasn't opportunity, and it happened to be with women. And because I'm a woman, it was an easy ask. And what I find with so many female professional athletes is when you say, ooh, will you come do this? Or will you jump in on this? Or will you help with this? So many women we're just really communal. And so many women are like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, let's do it. So honestly, it was out of necessity. I'm like, I want to see these things in the world. So I guess if somebody's not going to do it, I got to do it myself.
I hear you. Okay. So what words would you use to describe yourself when you're at your best?
My best. Resilient, competitive, focused, visionary, communicator, mentor, teacher, students at the same time, curious, team player, supportive. So all the stuff I learned in sport, to be honest with you.
Okay. Love it. What challenge or dream has shaped who you are today?
This is an easy one. I did the biggest, most important expedition in my life was riding the Ho Chi Minh Trail, 1,200 miles through Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And I put together that expedition for a couple purposes. One, nobody'd ridden it before, end to end. And I also wanted to go to the place where my dad's plane was shot down in the Vietnam War. And he He died in that crash when I was 3. We didn't know it until years later. And there was always just this longing to sort of go to these map coordinates and see what was there in the middle of the jungle. And so this expedition I did was a month long on the trail, and in partnership with Red Bull, which was great. I brought this idea to them, and they helped film a documentary called Blood Road. And that journey, I mean, it was an amazing expedition, just like the historical aspect of it, being in, Southeast Asia, and really learning about a war that affected my family, but I never really learned about and had never set foot in that place. And so a really amazing expedition for me, but also a connection for my family, and a connection to a place that obviously really affected me, and an incident that really affected me, but also, out there finding a purpose for my sport, and finding that, I could do more with than just be on a podium, that those things were all important, but they were actually realizing that they were actually springboards to the next thing, instead of, oh, I was a world champion, okay, done, and then I'll retire and go on to my next career. But realizing out there that I could use my sport for a lot more. And that's where I launched the Be Good Foundation in my dad's name. And really it was launched because I saw all the unexploded ordnance still along the trail that, are still killing people 50 years after the war is over. And so suddenly that ride was not about me and my family anymore. It was about really believing that my dad brought me there to kind of show me that I could do more with my bike, and that there was a lot more good that I could do in the world. And that ride was 8 years ago. And since, it's launched an Emmy Award winning film, it's launched my foundation, has pushed, me to really move the trajectory of my career, to be giving back a lot more. And so that was a really pivotal, amazing ride. And I sort of thought it would be like, okay, we did this expedition, we released this film, it won an Emmy, okay, next thing. But now, it's so obvious that it's such an integral part of sort of the spiral that has been building over the decades.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it gives me the chills. So I'm just gonna say that it's amazing. So, I think you have sat in just a different position than a lot of the women that we've been talking to, in the fact that you have very purposefully created a strong tribe of women around you. I feel like every time I see you, you have this energy of these powerful women around you. And it's awesome. Like I'm so excited every time I bump into you, because I know I'm going to meet some really cool people that are doing cool things. What is your favorite strategy to kind of bringing up the next woman behind you and pulling them along? What's your favorite way to identify who you want in that tribe? Because I mean, you have a pretty elite tribe, and who you want to bring in, and how to get them there, how to be that mentor, how to be, what's your best strategy for that?
Well, look, I mean, it starts in childhood, and I learned it as a kid, and I grew up in a very matriarchal family. My mom was a single mom because my dad, died in the Vietnam War, and, high powered in the computer tech industry, raising 2 girls. My grandmother was the first person to go to college, in her family. My aunt, like everyone, all the women in my family are very strong, very powerful women. And so I grew up just like under that kind of a wing, and just being like, well, yeah, this is how women are. We just like take charge, and, we just get after it. So it really does start with leading by example. And I'm so grateful that I had that upbringing. But then, I still remember, like, as a runner first, and I remember like watching an Olympics and watching like Zola Budd and like these other women that, I didn't know, but seeing that example is so important. And so I really try, one, to be present and be in the public eye, as exhausting as it is sometimes. I feel like people need to see, you can't be what you can't see. And so part of it is just showing up and just being there, being in the room, putting stuff on social media, going to my sponsors, even if it's a bunch of guys, and being like, hey, I have an idea. So I think a big part of being a mentor is really just showing up. But also there is nothing like an invitation from somebody, and this has happened to me. It happened to me with you, inviting me to be here. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. And so I really do try to, with my event with Private Idaho, invite people. And even if it's like people I don't know. And I was just like, I just reached out to Courtney Dauwalter, who's an amazing ultra runner, and she's winning everything this year. And I don't know her, but I saw a picture of her on a bike and I invited her. I'm like, hey, let's go on a bike ride. And she answered me back. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So the power of an invitation, I think, is really important, and not to feel like, oh, I don't know that person, they might not want to talk to me. I think often women, maybe don't have the confidence to just go out and ask. And you can do it with, humility and being subtle. You don't have to like elbow your way to the front of the room, but striking up a conversation with confidence and extending an invitation to someone else, or saying yes to an invitation that comes from someone you don't know, in a position that you're interested in. I think that that's really powerful. And it's really not that hard. You're not like, I'm going to be a mentor for people. You really just show up as your authentic self. And often that is just amazing for somebody to see, and you never know who's going to see. I got a note back, really cool note back from a girl I'd written a note to years ago. She was getting involved with mountain biking and she was having her first race. And a friend just asked me, hey, will you write a note, advice to this young girl who's doing her first race? And I was like, sure. I didn't even remember writing it. But I wrote back to her and sent it to her. And it was basically like, believe in yourself, show up. And this is like 10 years later, she just sent me a note that she has that framed. It's in her room, her bedroom. And she just was like going to like compete in a World Cup and like, really making it as a female athlete. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this girl has this letter hanging in her room. So I really do try to, if I get an ask like that, I try to be there for other people, even if I don't know them, because people have done that for me. And so it's sort of part of the cycle of life, is you reach down and ask, but you also give. And I do say all the time, I'm a student and a teacher, and I want to be that for the rest of my life. So I don't view myself as a mentor because I know everything or I have it all figured out. It's more that like, hey, we're all just in this together. And, even if we're fumbling along, and I will say, look, people might look at my career and think that I had this whole path, I had it all figured out, and I really didn't. I kind of made it all up, but that works if you surround yourself with good people and you have the confidence, and you sort of just keep working at it.
Yeah. I did an Instagram live this morning, and we were talking about this, just kind of how she asked me what 3 pieces of advice I would give someone starting their career. And I said, you have to give people a chance, just like extending that invitation. And because so many people took a chance on me, and I that message is just so powerful, to give someone a chance, to extend an invitation, to just open up a little bit of it, say, come in, I'm going to help get you in here, or I'm giving you this opportunity. It's such a powerful thing that I think sometimes as we get further up in our careers, we forget what that means, so like, what a great reminder that young woman reached out to 10 years later and said, this is hung on my wall and I look at it every day and look where I've got. I mean, it's amazing how something that can, from a leader standpoint, can be almost significant for us, can be so impactful for someone who has a really big dream or a really big goal and is just starting. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
super cool.
I was pretty happy, and good for her for actually writing back to me, because that
absolutely
leadership too.
Yep. Absolutely. No, that's a great story, and just such a great example of how it doesn't have to be a gesture to make a huge impact. right? It can be something like a note from someone you really respect or things like that. It's a good reminder to take the do that when those asks come in, because you never know what kind of that's so everything that you do, it's so many people vying for your attention. You set some boundaries for your personal space a little bit, especially when you're in the public eye and people are pulling at you for directions.
Yeah. So, and actually, I'm glad you're asking this question because about 20 months ago, I fell on my head on my bike and had a mild concussion and have had ongoing symptoms for until still now. And that was a really important lesson for me on sort of the physical frailty of our body and how important it is to feel strong and have energy and to be able to give. And so for the first time in my life, I literally sort of bonked on my head. And I've had to learn some of those lessons of creating boundaries so that I could sort of maintain my energy, one, to heal, but things that I'm going to carry on forward. And a lot of that was that, look, if you don't take care of this package that we live in, your body, your mind, your spirit, that it will deteriorate and it won't be able to serve you to do the things that you want to do. And so while my mind and my intention was like, I'm going to write another book and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do all that other stuff, I wasn't able to follow through with some of those things in the last year and a half because I just physically didn't have the energy. And so it's a really good lesson for me that on energy conservation and how I've sort of morphed my work is I've actually taken lessons from what I've learned in sport. And so I got a couple coaches in business to help me prioritize my time and to put in some structure like I would with like my own cycling coach is like, this is what you're going to do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you're going to take a break and then you're going to do this. And then we're going to keep track of your progress. And then we're going to go back and do it again. And so I really have had to take what I know from sport and bring that in, kind of treat my business life, my work life, a little bit like I do my sport. And so I have some coaches, I have a structure, I have scheduled rest time, I have, scheduled meditation and nutrition and sleep, prioritizing things that you think you're only going to serve you as an athlete. But look, we're all performing in a human body. And so everyone wants to have the best performing body that they have. And news alert, your mind is connected to your body. And so whatever you're eating, sleeping, doing, it's affecting you cognitively and how you feel and how you move, your energy. And so I'm actually kind of grateful for the concussion because for the first time, my body was kind of like in a fragile state. And so I really did have to go back to those practices and put in a lot more structure instead of just winging it and, I'll get to that tomorrow, or I'll do that or do that. So I kind of put a training structure into my work. And that's been one really important for me. It's been great for my relationship at home. And it's been really healthy for my brain, it's like more is not like, that's not how you win at work by like doing 15 hours a day. And it's the same, if I look at the events that I do where, and these are small snapshots where I'm doing a week-long event and I may only be sleeping 4 hours a night on the trail. My body, by the time I'm done with that, is so deteriorated. I can barely navigate or think straight. And so if you take that into your daily life, you can only sustain, cutting those kind of corners for a very short period of time. And why would you? Don't you want your mind and your cognitive, and don't you want to feel good and be at your best and have your energy level be super high? So I think we're starting to learn that the cost of cutting those corners is really not worth it. And I have the concussion to kind of thank for sort of fast tracking me to get back to taking care of myself as I would like an athlete.
It's really interesting. I was actually just talking to a friend earlier today about, thank goodness that recovery and sleep has taken the forefront, I think, in a lot of these conversations coming out of the athletic world, but we've translated it into the other world. I mean, I would be in the hospital for 48 hours without sleeping, thinking I was making good decisions, like taking care of someone and being so hypocritical. And my friends would call me and they would say, oh, my loved one has this. What should they do? I need to go to the hospital. What questions should I ask? And my answer every time was, ask them when the last time they slept was. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, you don't know if that person has been up all night, been up for 2 days, or is in a great place. And I was like, so why not ask? They might lie. They might tell you the truth. I don't know. But no one asks questions. And it's pretty scary how many times the answer is, oh, I slept for 2 hours, came in and did 2 cases, went back to sleep for an hour. And now I'm here to work my regular scheduled day, and that it just shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, I
and
mean, the nice thing is science is now showing, and with trackers and all that, they're showing that, hey, you really aren't totally with it after 48 hours of no sleep. As much as you think you are, you're really not. And so science is kind of proving that, and that's where people are adhering and paying more attention, because you're like, no, it's not just because your grandma said you should get 8 hours of sleep.
Right. You really need to.
8 glasses of water. You really should, because science says you should do it.
Right. Yep. And the healthcare world is usually the last to take that advice. So hopefully we'll get there. Okay. Not take up too much more of your time. What does it mean to you to prosper today?
Oh, prosper. I've been thinking about this word and I love it. And like, at first when you say, I don't know, sort of the antiquated definition of prosper is financially prosper, I want to have money or I want to win, or I want to, achieve X thing. And again, if I go back to sport and I think of like, for me, prospering is having adventures and a trail map and a compass bearing, but not necessarily like an end thing I'm going for. It's kind of not what I'm doing or, but how I'm doing it, and sort of how am I being? Am I living with vitality? Am I enjoying today? Am I still striving? Not just like treading water, striving toward something, but the definition of prosper is not achieving that thing. There isn't an actual thing more than a way. So I think of prosper as a way instead of a ring to grab, or a thing that gets checked off a list.
Things all dry and fluffy like up in heaven.